Hi, everyone. I guess you're here. I can't see anyone else, but I can see a list of your names, so that's good. Maybe I should, one sec, maybe I should unmute you all and you can just, you can confirm that you are in fact here. Is that a good way to start? Are people here? Are people here?
Hey.
Anthony, Bella, Guy, Mia.
Hey.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. Hi.
So I'll say this, I've never done this before. I mean, I've taught this session before, but I've never done this sort of thing where I'm speaking to people without seeing them. I assume it will be fine. I have no idea. I'd love to interact with you while we are learning and teaching. So when I kind of open it up for questions or comments, please unmute yourselves so you can speak. Just another question, can people see also, because I can't, on my screen, can you also see the source sheet?
No.
Yes.
Oh, I can't.
The PowerPoint.
Yeah, the PowerPoint, yeah. So there's a PowerPoint you can potentially download, but I'm also going to try and, just one second. Can you guys see this, what's on my screen now? Peace in Jewish Texts?
Yeah.
Yes.
Can anyone not see it? Okay. If I go back to this, can you still see it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, good. So I'm going to read everything out. So if you don't have the text in front of you, that's fine. A few words of introduction. My name's Calev. As you may be able to hear, I was born in England, been in Israel since 2005. And I have a lot of loves, including probably primarily my family, who hopefully will not be making too much noise. But two things I love international relations, and I love Jewish texts. And what I really love is to be able to bring them into conversation with one another. So as I wrote on kind of the blurb, let's try and imagine a conversation that would have Amos Oz and David Grossman, and a rabbi from the Gemara, and Isaiah Berlin, the philosopher, and they're discussing something that is of contemporary relevance to us. What would such a conversation sound like? And that is what I would like us together to learn and to try and recreate for ourselves. So that's basically the idea of this learning. We're going to be doing a small or fair amount of Jewish text, but if you don't have any experience with that, that's absolutely fine. It's not overly complicated. And I think what's particularly interesting for us as, let's say, part of the Jewish people, rather than the Chinese or the Persians or all sorts of other ancient civilizations, is that for many, many years, even if we wanted to, we didn't really have the ability to either make war or make peace. We didn't have a state, we didn't have an army, we didn't have diplomats. And so Jewish tradition is a little bit stunted in some ways when talking about these things. So we're going to dig through Jewish tradition to try and find out what Judaism thinks about peace, which I don't really like that as a phrase. I'll give you a kind of short summary. Judaism doesn't say one thing about anything, about peace, about war, about abortion, about social democracy. You know, any sentence that starts Judaism says X about this topic, you should probably ignore, because Judaism says a lot of things on most topics. But we are, in a hopefully very non-political way, we're going to try and look through what different Jewish texts think about peace. Is that more or less clear so far as a summary?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great, good. So the first source on the page, for those who have got it, or even if not, I'm going to read it, more or less says what I've said already. It's by someone called Aviezer Ravitsky, who is quite an important modern Jewish philosopher. He used to teach, I think, at Hebrew University, from a religious Zionist background. And he says this, and this really sets the scene for what we're going to do. I'm just reading from my printed out sheet, so my eyes will be looking down. Throughout Jewish history, neither war nor peace really stood as a concrete option for the Jewish people. The Jew, lacking political sovereignty, had no status in the international debate, and the question of war or peace in the here and now did not press him for an immediate response or decision. Only the wars of the Gentiles belonged to concrete historical reality, and that reality was the Jews' involuntary lot. On the other hand, the ancient wars of Israel were a matter more for theology than politics. They took place in scripture, even in the distant past, or at the approach of the Messianic era in the distant future. The Jew waged concrete war against the evil inclination more than he did against any historical foe. So let's imagine, putting technology aside, let's imagine we're in 16th century Poland, and we're thinking about war and we're thinking about peace. What could we possibly say about it? Well, we'd say, okay, well, King David, in the past, he used to wage war, but we don't really know much about that. And the Gentiles, the Poles and the Hungarians and whatever, they wage war, but that's not really our issue. So all of these, the issues of war and peace, we don't really have anything to say about it. In fact, and this is, I don't know how knowledgeable you are about different Jewish texts, but there's a phrase in Ethics of the Fathers, who is mighty? It goes through who is rich, who is happy, who is this, who is that, who is mighty? So who's mighty in Ethics of the Fathers? Not the warrior, not the soldier, the person in the person who is able to control their yetzer hara, their evil inclination. In other words, this whole idea of war and peace in the historical level wasn't an issue for Jews. But now it is. Because now we have a state, now we have an army, now we have a foreign ministry. So suddenly all of these things are relevant. But these are big challenges for us because traditionally we don't really have a lot of things to lean on. That's what I kind of want to move towards in our session. Now, I'd like to learn a midrash. What's a midrash? A midrash is something that the rabbis put together, and often what they'll do is they will take a part of text that is seemingly ambiguous. You know, it's actually a little bit like it's a little bit like a fan fiction. There'll be an area of text that will be ambiguous or that will require some sort of additional analysis, and they will then create a story around it in order to give us a lesson. I'll just give you an example, not relevant for us. The story of the Akedah, when Abraham takes his son Isaac, seemingly to sacrifice him, and when the Torah is talking about it, it says, Vayehi bayom hashlishi, and it was on the third day. Well, that invites a question. What happened? What happened before the third day? So the rabbis will then take the opportunity to write a whole series of conversations they had on the way, because the Torah said, and it was on the third day. That's Midrash. What Midrash are we going to learn? So we are going to learn, in my opinion, a fascinating Midrash that is based on text, which is actually not in the source sheet. In Genesis, in Bereshit, God says, Na'aseh Adam b'tsalmenu kidmutenu. Let us make man in our image, after our likeness. What's the question on this? Well, who's the we? A, there's no one else around, and B, I thought we were supposed to believe in only one God. So if we were part of, I don't know, Greek myth or Babylonian myth, the we, na'aseh, let us, we shall make, we could say, well, it's God talking to other gods. But Judaism doesn't believe in that. So the Midrash we're going to learn comes to answer that question of who is the we. But before we get to that, does anyone, I just want to open it up, does anyone have any ideas about who the we could potentially or theoretically be? Any ideas from people listening in?
Could it be the Jewish people?
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, so firstly, we don't need to think in literal ways. So no people currently exist, but yes, that could be an interesting idea that God is speaking to the Jewish people, suggesting, let us make humans. Absolutely, that's definitely an option. Any other suggestions? Okay, so if you think of anything as I'm talking, throw that in. A couple of things that I want to throw out. So Rashi, who's a Middle Ages commentator, says it's God showing his humility. He's kind of I don't know if any of you are English. We've got this phrase, the royal we. So when the Queen speaks, she says we, even though she's an individual. It's God using the royal we. He's being humble. It's as if he's even though only God is around, he's kind of allowing other people to comment. Another idea, which I think is very nice, is so humans have not been created yet, but animals have been created. One idea is when God says, Na'aseh Adam, let us make man, God's actually speaking to the animals. And actually that's nicely, because then we get this idea, well, who are we? Who are humans? We have a part of us that is divine, that's godly. We've also got a part of us that is animal-like. Say some people have got more of one and some people have got more of the other, but it's also quite a nice idea. What this Midrash says is God speaking to the angels. Now, we don't need to believe literally in angels, and we don't even actually need to believe literally in God. But what this Midrash we're about to learn has is something very interesting for how concepts, values, and humanity get along. So what we'll learn is that there are, according to the Midrash, there are 4 angels. There is chesed, which is kind of translated as kindness. There is emet, truth. There is tzedek, which is partially justice and partially righteousness. And there's shalom, there is peace. Now, if you didn't have the text in front of you, I would ask you to try and guess who says what. But we have it in front of us, so we're going to read it. But then I will ask you a couple of questions. And for me, what's particularly interesting is what peace says about whether humans should be created, and why peace says this when it probably could be on either side. And that's why I kind of want you to have in the back of your head, why does peace answer the way that it does? So I'm going to read a little bit in Hebrew, a little bit in English. Amar Rabbi Simon, Rabbi Simon said, B'sha'a sheba HaKadosh Baruch Hu livrot et Adam HaRishon, na'asu melachei hasheret kitim v'chaburot chaburot, mihem omrim al yivra, umehem omrim yivra. At the moment that God, the Holy One, chose to create the first Adam, the first person, the ministering angels broke up into factions. Again, we don't need to believe in angels here. What we're trying to do is understand what were the rabbis trying to put across. Now, some of these angels said, create Adam, and some of them said, don't create Adam. Now, who says what? Chesed Omer, loving kindness says, Yivra, create. Shehu gomer chasadim, because he will do acts of kindness. Ve'emet Omer, al Yivra, don't create Adam. Shekulo shkarim, for he's drenched in lies. Tzedek Omer, righteousness or justice says, Yivra, create. Shehu oset stakot, because he will do much stakah, he will do much goodness. And Shalom Omer, peace says, Alivra, Dechuliak Tata, don't create him, for Adam, for humans, will be essentially quarrelsome. Okay, so we've got two sets of angels, and they've been divided up into create, don't create, and peace and truth say do not, and chesed and tzedek, loving kindness and righteousness, say do. Now, what does God do? Ma asa hakadosh baruch hu natal emet v'hishlichu la'aretz. He took truth and he cast it down towards the earth. I always imagine the truth then smashes into hundreds of pieces, and all we have on earth is these fragments of heavenly truth that's been thrown down. Amru malacha sharet, the angel to God, Ribon ha'olamim, master of the universe. Ma'ata mevazeh tachsis al tichseha shelcha. Why do you shame the leader of your court? Let truth rise from the earth. So that's kind of version 1. 2 says create, 2 say don't create. God takes truth, throws truth to the ground. There's another option of what happened. Rav Huna Rabbah shel Tziporin Amar, the elder Rav Huna of Sepphoris said, Ad shemelacha sheret medainin elu im elu umitaskin elu im elu b'ra'o hakadosh baruch hu. While they were arguing, God created Adam. Amar lahen, ma atem medainin kvar ne'esa Adam. And then he said, why are you arguing? Adam has already been created. Now, I guess you guys have been in Israel for several months. I don't know how good your Hebrew is, but what the rabbis have done here is it's a play on words. Na'aseh Adam means let us make man, but na'aseh could also be ne'esa. It could be the passive tense. It could be Adam who's already been made. Ne'aseh Adam. So the second version suggests that while they're arguing, God creates and then says, it's too late. Ne'aseh Adam, Adam has already been created. Now, I want to open it up to you guys. Firstly, any thoughts you have about this Midrash? Why peace is in the no category rather than yes category? I think it could quite easily be in the yes category. And we've got two versions. In one version, God throws truth to the ground. And in the second version, while they're arguing, God just makes Adam. What's the common denominator of God's behavior in both of those versions? I want to open it up to you guys. Feel free to unmute yourself and share any thoughts that you may have. And say your name as well, so I kind of have some sort of idea of who's speaking. Any suggestions? Okay. So I'm going to make a few comments. In both options, God doesn't have an answer to the angels. As in the first one, he acts violently, throws truth to the ground, and in the second one, he acts unilaterally. God doesn't say, listen truth, listen peace, I understand that you are opposed to this. I understand you've got issues, but I'm about to do this amazing experiment where I'm going to create humans, and I want to see how they work things out. God could have said that, but in neither version does God engage in any sort of conversation with the angels. Instead, God acts violently and God acts unilaterally. It's as if we were all discussing what pizza to order, and then I just go ahead and order mushrooms and say, well, it's on the way. That sort of action suggests to me God doesn't have a strong answer to the angels. When emet, when truth says, don't create Adam, when peace says, don't create Adam, God doesn't have a good answer. The only way that Adam can be created is if God acts either violently or unilaterally. And I want us to think about that going forward. It's weird that God doesn't engage with the angels. The other thing that I want you to keep in mind as we go along is, why does peace say no? As in, why doesn't peace say create? Because Adam will have the opportunity to do lots, there'll be arguments, but then Adam will have the opportunity to create peace. Why does peace say no rather than peace saying yes? So I want you to have that in your head as we go on. Now I'm gonna switch. 1 second. Can you see the next? Can you see the next page? The different types of peace.
Yeah. I have a question.
Yeah, sure. Who's this?
Guy.
Guy.
Why would peace want to open up the option to a path that would lead to like a lack of peace?
As in, by the creation of Adam, you will inherently create a situation where there won't be peace.
Yeah.
Is that what you're asking? So
Yeah.
let's expand. I think it's an excellent question. Let's expand that question. It's the same with emet in theory. It's the same with truth. Truth is saying the moment you create humans, you are going to have an absence of truth. But we could probably say that for all four. We could say the moment you create humans, you're going to have an absence of kindness. And the moment you create humans, you're going to have an absence of righteousness. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but
Or do you think that do you think there's something unique to peace and truth which is different to righteousness and justice and kindness? What's the difference between the four of them?
I think for truth and peace, like you either have truth or you don't, and you either have peace or you don't. Like you can say a statement with both the truth and a lie in it, and you will still be lying. Whereas you can do things which aren't inherently loving and do things which are loving and kind, and you will be loving and kind. And you can do things which are righteous and not inherently righteous, but not the antithesis of righteousness, and you would still be righteous.
Okay, so Guy, I like that a lot. I like that a lot. What you're basically saying is chesed and tzedek, righteousness and kindness, there's a spectrum. I can be really, really kind. I can be kind of kind. I can be not so much kind. But truth, it's binary. Either you're truthful or you're not. And peace, either it's peaceful or it's not. So I'm really glad you made that comment. I would argue the truth is absolutely binary. And what we will now look at is whether that's the case with peace. Is peace a spectrum, or is peace you either have it or you don't? And without jumping to the end, there are different concepts of peace in Judaism. There is a biblical prophetic type of peace, which is very similar to what you just said. and there is a rabbinic type of peace, which is much closer to a spectrum. And that is that's what we're going to explore now. But you're absolutely right. If your value is binary, like truth, then don't create Adam. But if your value can be found somewhere along the spectrum, then maybe you should, because then you're creating an opportunity for humans to do those things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, great, thanks. Really excellent comments. So we're on the second page now, different types of peace. So again, just to summarize, so we've got this Midrash that has peace in the anti-human category alongside truth. Now we're going to look at when we talk about peace in the Bible, what does it say? And without going too much into it, there's it's quite utopian. It's quite messianic. So we've got this idea they'll beat their swords. It's from Isaiah. They'll beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. We've got another one from Isaiah. The wolf will lie with the lamb. The leopard will lie with the goat. As in, when the prophets are talking about peace, they are imagining this kind of end of days type situation where everything is wonderful. I don't know if you guys saw all of these famous people in isolation singing Imagine by John Lennon. It's like the Imagine song, basically. That when the Bible talks about peace, it talks about this utopian messianic type thing, the brotherhood of man, as Lennon would say. However, when the rabbis talk about peace, they talk about something a bit different. They actually don't talk about shalom, peace. They talk about darkei shalom, the ways of peace. I just want to read the third. I don't know if you guys have got it. Just a third source on page 2. They bring this idea in, darkei shalom, for the sake of peace. The poor of the non-Jews should not be prevented from gathering gleanings. For the sake of peace, we should support the Gentile poor, just as we support the Jewish poor. For the sake of peace, we should visit non-Jewish sick and the Jewish sick. We should bury the non-Jewish dead, just as we bury Jewish people who have died. So suddenly we've got this new concept, which is not shalom, it's not peace, it's darkei shalom. And then I want to bring in something that Jonathan Sacks wrote. For those who are British, you'll know Jonathan Sacks is a former chief rabbi, very important rabbinic and philosophical thinker in 20th and 21st century Judaism. And excuse me, what Sacks does is he digs down into the difference between these different conceptions of peace. On the one hand, the prophetic version, the wolf shall lie with the lamb, and in the other hand, what he calls the rabbinic version, which is not shalom, it's darkei shalom. And he reads as follows. For those who have got it, or for those who can see it on my screen, you can follow along. Other people, you can just listen. The difference between the rabbinic and prophetic conceptions is striking. The ways of peace are clearly not peace as Isaiah or Micha, both of those who are prophets, clearly not the peace that the prophets envisioned. At first sight, these rabbinic laws lack the grandeur of the prophets. They're small scale, local, even prosaic. They envisage no transformation of the universe of human sensibility. They seem to be no more than pragmatism, generously conceived. They are attempts to avoid the type of civil strife from which Jews suffered so often during the long night of exile. And for these reasons, the ways of peace have not been seen for the innovation that it is. The way of peace is in its way as original an idea as that of peace itself. We can define it, a peace in an unredeemed world. just read the next paragraph and then I'll open it up if anyone's got any questions. What the sages who articulated the way of peace understood was that they were not prophets. They were heirs to the prophets, continuers of their tradition, but they did not believe that they were living in the end of days. They knew that in this not yet fully redeemed world, peace means living with difference, with those who have another faith and other texts. That is the fundamental distinction between the prophetic peace of religious unity and the rabbinic peace of religious diversity, with all the compromise, restraint, and mutual respect that coexistence requires. The prophets articulated utopian peace. The sages, a non-utopian program for peace in the here and now. That is what is fundamental and original in the idea of the ways of peace. And then he sums up. Envisioned peace as it would come to pass in what Francis Fukuyama called the end of history. The rabbis constructed a template of peace tailored to the crooked timber of humanity. Now, this is a little bit complicated, but basically what he's saying is as follows. The Bible talks about these very good ideas of peace. When we say shalom, shalom, the root of it is shlemut, shalem, completeness. Everything is perfection. Peace for the Bible is basically the wolf lying down with the lamb. It's John Lennon. It's the brotherhood of man. It's everyone getting along. I just kind of go along according to kind of what Guy suggested. It's this binary thing of you have it and it's perfect and it's amazing. But the rabbis aren't living in such a world. The rabbis are living in a pre-messianic, unredeemed world where you're not in this binary thing of either peace or war. You need to live with your neighbors. You need to act kindly. And therefore, they suggest this new concept, Darkei Shalom, and Darkei Shalom is about how do you create, he calls it a program for peace in an unredeemed world. But clearly when we talk about that sort of peace, it's a very, very different type of peace than they shall beat their swords and shares that Isaiah is talking about. Now it's interesting because when we talk about the origins of the word peace, so in Hebrew, peace means shalom. The origins of shalom, as I mentioned before, shalom, shlemut, shalem, completeness, perfection. But the English peace doesn't come from that. The English peace comes from something else. The English peace comes from the Latin pax. And pax, this is from Wikipedia, so it's obviously correct. Pax means freedom from civil disorder. And then we have Pax, the Roman goddess of peace. Pax Romana, a period of relative peace and stability in the Roman Empire. I don't know if anyone knows why. How did the Romans succeed in getting relatively peace and stability in their empire? Well, they basically put down any rebellions, basically killed anyone who didn't want to live under the Roman Empire. So Pax is very, very different to Shalom. Pax is a freedom from civil disorder. So it's not as if we're all best buddies. It's just that no one is coming to kill us. That's one type of Pax. And Pax Romana is we have been forced through Roman might to live under them. Maybe we're happy about it, maybe we're not particularly happy about it, but there's not much we can do because we don't have any power to rebel against them. That is a very, very different type. Pax is very different to Shalom. Again, Shalom, Shlemut, peace is perfection, prophetic peace. Pax is not prophetic peace at all. Pax is maybe I don't like you, but we've agreed that we're not going to fight each other anymore. We've agreed we're not going to kill each other. We've agreed we're not going to battle. Or you are so powerful that I live under you in a certain amount of stability, but I still hate you. That's pax. So now we've got two sets of different versions. We've got a prophetic and a rabbinic version of peace, shalom and darkei shalom, peace and the ways of peace. And then in English, we've got peace from shalom, shlemut, and we've got peace from pax. And those are very, very different things. And I want us to have both of those conceptions in our head as we go on. And we're now going to jump to much more contemporary thinking. Does anyone have any? Yeah. Does anyone have any comments or questions before we move on to the next page?
I have a question. Would you say that rabbinic peace would work as like a step before prophetic peace? Like, are the rabbis still working towards reaching a prophetic idea of peace, or are they distinguishing and saying we actually want this as like opposed to unity, like in the sense of the prophets?
This is Abishai, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. That's a really, really great question. Have they given up on it, or have they said, sorry, just because there was, I mean, every comment so far has been great, but I just want to go back to Guy's idea. Are they saying it's a spectrum, and through darkei shalom, we will ultimately get to shalom? Shalom with like a big S, let's say? Or are they saying, you know what? This prophetic peace, we wouldn't say it out loud, but it's not really so relevant. And so we're just going to go with something else. I tell you the truth, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I think it's certainly interesting to think about. I think you could probably argue it out both ways. Like, I think darkei shalom ultimately might lead to the brotherhood of man. It certainly leads to a better situation between me and my non-Jewish neighbor. So there's certainly no harm in it. The rabbis probably wouldn't have given up on the messianic conception. They probably would have believed that one day we'll get there. But I don't know. I don't know. I think you could probably argue it out either way. It's a really, really good point.
Can I make a point?
Yeah, please.
Does it matter if we're aiming, which one we're aiming for, though? Because for Tikkun Olam, we want a world in which, you know, everything is peaceful in apostrophe marks. So, but does it matter if it's the one where we're all unified or not? Because at the end of the day, if we've achieved a form of Tikkun Olam, a form of peace, then surely we're better than where we were yesterday, which is part of the goal.
So I'll put it this way, and this is getting to, this is jumping a little bit towards the conclusion, but it's worth doing now. This is the question. If your conception of peace is only the prophetic one, then maybe you think the rabbinic one is just a bit rubbish. As in, if you're imagining that the wolf shall lie down with the lamb, can you really get motivated to bring soup to your neighbor who's not feeling well? As in, there is a worry. Listen, all of the steps of darkei shalom are wonderful. Certainly for Tikkun Olam, we should definitely be doing all of those things. But maybe if in your head, and now let's get, I don't like getting political, but let's get political for a bit. What sort of peace are you thinking about? And there were people who, let's say, opposed the peace with Egypt because they said, this is not the peace of the Bible. This is not the peace we dreamed about. We need to make all of these compromises for peace in inverted commas. This isn't peace. It's absence of war. It's pax. It's not shalom. So if in your head the peace you have in your mind is the shalom shlemut type peace, you could actually get a bit disillusioned with doing the day-to-day work of building a better world. I'd say that's the danger. So the danger is, because you're so taken up with peace type 1, you can't really be bothered with the pax. Does that make sense?
I would argue it could come as the other way around, because if pax,
Okay.
I don't know if I misunderstood, but if pax is a more oppressive form of peace, where you don't have the power to rebel, you don't have the power to express yourself, then that is the prophetic type of peace, because there's only one right, correct way in which everyone has religious unity. Whereas the real peace to me, and this is probably my own modern interpretation, the real peace to me is that we can all live side by side and interact and share experiences while not attacking and going to war with one another.
Okay, so that's the, in the end of days, are we all going to be the same, or are we all going to be able to be our unique selves and tribes, but kind of all get on and respect one another? What's that? Let me just think about this for a moment. I think Pax is not particularly exciting. It's not romantic. The idea that I can walk in the street without someone attacking me is, I think, when we think about peace in Judaism, that's not really what we think about. We think about these very romantic, absolute ideas of like the whole world is going to be changed in a particular direction of I don't know, unity or understanding God or whatever that might be. And then you've got the rabbis basically saying, if your non-Jewish neighbor is sick, go and visit them. And then you think, yeah, but I want the big peace. I want the shalom, and all you're giving me is this darkei shalom, the ways of peace. I can get a bit disillusioned by that. But at the same time, lots and lots of ways of peace could potentially lead one day to the ultimate. But I want us to have these two ideas of shalom and pax in our heads as we read on. I hope I've answered or in some ways answered what you were saying. Now I want to bring in, and now we're going to get more modern, and now we might even get a bit more political. And I've got this theory. You may like it, you may not. After the Oslo Accords, there was a peace process, and what we were aiming for was a peace agreement. And Oslo went wrong, and perhaps for another time, I'm doing another session on this, but another time on why exactly it went wrong, whose fault it was, etc. But after the Intifada, Israelis actually stopped talking about peace. It's quite interesting. They have elections when no one talks about it. They talk about a political process. They talk about a political arrangement. They talk about an agreement. They stop talking about peace. And one reason might be is because we kind of realized that the shalom that people wanted wasn't going to happen. And that disillusionment kind of left out, it made us stop talking about it. And what we're going to read now are
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
I'm just wondering, who are you talking about when you're saying like they stopped talking about peace? Is it the Israeli government or like Jewish people?
Well, this is Bella, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a much longer conversation, but I'd argue, and this is a personal opinion, that even the Israeli left, now we're getting properly political. So excuse me. The Israeli left talked about coming to an agreement with the Palestinians. It talked about separation. for demographic reasons, for all sorts of reasons. But Perez's big idea, the new Middle East, going to Damascus on the weekend to eat hummus, having like lovey-doveyness with the Palestinians, kind of disappeared after the Intifada. So there were still people saying, listen, we need to come to an agreement with the Palestinians on the Israeli left, on the Israeli center left, absolutely. But people kind of stopped talking about peace. And that's interesting. Again, I guess people would agree, some people would disagree. Even in the 3 elections we've had in the last year, Meretz kind of talks about coming to an agreement, but I don't want to sound ageist, but I was a teenager in the 1990s. People talked about peace. I don't feel people talk about peace anymore. They talk about coming to an agreement. They talk about the need to separate. They talk about even the need for Palestinian statehood, but they don't really talk about peace anymore. Even the phraseology, I don't know how good your Hebrew is. We used to talk about a heskem shalom, a peace agreement. We used to talk about sof sichsuch, the end of conflict. Now we talk about talich hamedini, the political process. We talk about a hesder medini, a political arrangement. We kind of stopped. I would argue even most Israelis, right and left, stopped talking about peace. And where I'm going with this is we're about to read two sources from David Grossman and Amos Oz. What's interesting about Amos Oz and Grossman, apart from the fact they are amazing authors and founders of the Israeli peace movement, okay? They're founders of the Israeli peace movement. Let's read what they say about peace and have in the back of your head this idea of shalom from shlemut and peace from pax. Okay, it's interesting. Let's have a look. Let me just make sure. I don't know if you guys can see my screen. I'm going to read it out. So what does Grossman say? Again, these guys are on the Israeli left. They are founders of the peace movement. We need peace, and I adore them, by the way. I adore them. We need peace in order to be, but we also need to be aware of the limitations that there will be to a future peace agreement. I know what it isn't some sort of peace in which us and the Palestinians will stride hand in hand towards the sunset. It will be a peace that will be broken, a peace that will provide reasons and justifications for both sides to say, you see how it's impossible to rely on them and do a deal? But with a bit of luck, we may succeed in creating not bad neighborliness here. More than that, I don't wish for. Not bad neighborliness. That, maybe in 100 years or so, can lead to even deeper relations. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not passing judgment on this, whether it's good or bad. It's interesting that this is now the peace, and you know what? I'd love this. This would be amazing, okay? But this is the peace that the Israeli founders of the peace movement are now talking about. Again, no judgments. This ain't prophetic peace. This is the world of Pax. This is the rabbinic world of one small step and another small step, and maybe you get somewhere better than we are today. What does Oz say? I love this. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is a clash of right and right. Tragedies are resolved in one of two. Sorry, it's a tragic clash of right and right. How do you resolve tragedies? One of two ways: Shakespearean way or the Chekhov way. In a tragedy by Shakespeare, the stage at the end is littered with dead bodies. In a tragedy by Chekhov, everyone is unhappy, bitter, disillusioned, and melancholy, but they are alive. My colleagues in the peace movement and I are working for a Chekhovian, not a Shakespearean conclusion. To me, this is pretty amazing. So again, we've got these two, in inverted commas, two Jewish traditional, I don't like that phrase, Jewish traditional versions of peace. A prophetic peace, the wolf shall lie with the lamb, and a rabbinic peace. You know what? If your neighbor isn't feeling well, go and visit them. That over time will breed some sort of peace. Okay, we've got those two conceptions. We've then got other two conceptions: peace as shalom, peace as perfection, and peace as pax. Not particularly happy, but I'm not going to kill you. And now we've got two founders of the Israel, and by the way, I haven't brought Perez, who talked about a much more prophetic type of shalom, but we've got two founders of the Israeli peace movement who are talking about a much less romantic version of peace. And again, this would be awesome compared to where we are now, but it's much closer to peace as a spectrum rather than peace being binary. Much closer to pax than shalom, much closer to rabbinic peace than prophetic peace. And now I want to read, this was an article actually in the Jerusalem Post.
Wait, before we move on,
yes, Avishai.
can I ask, Amos Oz, because like he could have chosen like any examples, but he chose like a super bleak one in terms of the Shakespearean conclusion and a little less bleak one in terms of, is there like, why, like if you consider you've got all these different examples at your fan, you could have chosen even like a more rabbinic or prophetic version, but it's like a bleak and a little less bleak version. They're not, I guess.
You talking about Oz, or you talking about me?
Oz, and
Oz,
I guess your understanding of it.
Well, so listen, I don't want to big up any other sessions I'm doing, but I'm doing a non-textual kind of peace process, past, present, and future. I think and this is what I'm going to say is more relevant to that. I think the Israeli peace movement underwent a big change where it realized that the dreams of it still wanted an agreement and it still wanted separation, either for security reasons or moral reasons or diplomatic reasons or human rights reasons, all sorts of reasons. But it stopped thinking that suddenly all of our problems were going to be solved. And in the 90s, that very much was the feeling. I think the fact that Oz and Grossman both think that just suggests that they kind of, it was just a very somber or sober reading of the Middle East. Listen, we're free to disagree with it, but I'm trying to present through a variety of examples these two different types of peace, and what these guys are talking about, which is peace, but it's peace as pax. By the way, I don't want you to think pax is bad. Pax is awesome. Pax is great, but it's different. And you know what? Just because we're short of time, I'm going to skip the Tal Becker piece, but maybe you want to read it in your own time. Tal Becker was Livni's main negotiator when she was foreign minister. So a lot of the Annapolis negotiations was done by Tal Becker. And Tal Becker basically says, you know what? What peace is absence of war. It's an agreement to stop people fighting. And if in your head you think peace is end of days, you're just gonna end up being disappointed. And it might, and this goes back to something that I was, Guy and Avishai and we were talking about. If the only peace in your head is the prophetic one, it actually may prevent you in the meantime from doing the smaller, less romantic, darkei shalom ways of peace. That's kind of in some ways the danger. So I'll just give you an example. There were people who were opposed to the peace agreement with Egypt. They said, for true peace, I'd be willing to leave my home. So when they were talking about true peace, they were talking about this lovey-dovey type of peace. And now, so I'm going to skip Talbecker. I want to go on to the last page. And now we're going to go back to the Midrash. And I want to try and answer the question of why do the four angels divide up in the way they do? So let's read it again. And this guy kind of touched on this already. If you look at the Hebrew, it's a bit harder in the English. If you look at the Hebrew, what does chesed say? Yivra, create, shehu gomel chasadim. He will do acts of kindness. And what does tzedek say? Yivra, shehu oseh tzedakot. He will do acts of tzedakah, acts of righteousness. What do emet and shalom say? What do truth and peace say? Don't create shekulo shkarim, for his essence, kulo, all of him is lies. And what does peace say? Alivra dechuliak tata, because he's essentially quarrelsome. They're making different arguments. The ones who say create because they will do acts of kindness, of righteousness, of justice. Emet and shalom, peace and truth say don't create because their essence is anti us. In other words, they are absolute values. Absolute truth can't deal with humans. Okay, there's a wonderful quote by also by Jonathan Sachs, which I'm going to read, and he's talking about truth. But every time I say truth, switch it with peace, because it works. Because the argument I'm going to make is, why does peace say no instead of yes? Because this peace is absolute peace. And absolute peace doesn't have a place in our mucky world. It has a place in the prophets, and it has a place in the Messianic era, but our world is not a world of prophetic peace, it's a world of pax. And therefore, if you're holding on to peace as an absolute value, you can't get anywhere in the world. So I'm going to read Sachs. And every time I say truth, think peace. For life to be livable, and Sachs is talking about this Midrash, for life to be livable, truth on earth cannot be what it is in heaven. Truth in heaven may be platonic, eternal, harmonious, radiant. The man cannot aspire to such truth, and if he does, he will create conflict. Men kill because they believe they possess the truth, while their opponents are in error. In that case, says God, throwing truth to the ground, let human beings live by a different standard of truth, one that is human and thus conscious of its limitations. Truth on the ground is multiple partial. Fragments of it lie everywhere. Each person, culture, and language has part of it. None has it all. Now let's switch it to peace. Peace in heaven, in brackets, peace in the Bible, peace amongst the prophets, is alien, excuse me, is alien to what we have on earth. If that's the sort of peace you want, you'll say don't create humans, because the two can't live together. Absolute values, Isaiah Berlin, if any of you want to read it, absolute values and humans will always clash, because absolute values need to be compromised on and balanced with other values. So if you want shalom as shleimut, if you want peace as completion, as perfection, as John Lennon, as the wolf shall lie with the lamb, you won't find it on earth. And in fact, you'll just get frustrated, and maybe you'll even give up. What do we have on earth? Just like we have partial truth, we have partial peace, what I would call the rabbinic conception of peace, Dakei Shalom, or pax. And once we're in a world of pax, once we're on the spectrum of doing a bit more, rather than either you're in peace or you're in war, then we'll be able to move forward. So there's a few sources we didn't get to. If you want to read them yourselves, you're more than welcome. If you want to message me afterwards and discuss it further, you're more than welcome. But we've kind of had our hour, and I realize there might be other sessions going on now. I said at the beginning, one of my pet peeves is when people say, take a topic, what does Judaism think? Oh, it thinks X. So what does Judaism think about peace? Well, Judaism doesn't think one thing about peace. There's a prophetic biblical idea of peace, and there is a rabbinical idea of peace. And even within peace itself, there's peace from shalom and there's peace from pax. And they're two very, very different things. I would like to argue that peace from shalom shleimut, completion, finds it difficult to cope with the world. It's fine in the Messianic era, but in our era, it's problematic. If you come in the Middle East as an Israeli diplomat and you're trying to create peace as shalom, you can have a problem. If you want to try and create peace as pax, maybe you will succeed in making the world a slightly better place. And if you do it enough times, maybe you'll succeed in making the world a lot better place. The last source, which I'll leave for you to read yourselves, also by Ravitsky, leaves us with a question. Are we giving something up? By giving up on the Messianic, do we lose something? On the other hand, if all we've got is a Messianic, how can we cope with our regular lives? And that's a question, Ravitsky says, doesn't appear in any book. It's for us to try and work out ourselves, both as individuals and as a nation and as a state. And again, I think one of the most amazing things is the Jewish people re-established sovereignty for the first time in a very long time. And now these issues, which used to be the realm of history books, is suddenly now contemporary. And we need to work out all of these things. And how we work that out is one of the major challenges that we as a people face. So I'm going to leave you with those ideas. Very happy for any comments now, or if you want to contact me after you've read the entirety of the source sheet, you're also welcome to do that. Thank you very much. I'm not used to this kind of interaction. I hope it was okay. For those who contributed, thank you very much. It was really, really useful and interesting and productive. And I was going to say, hopefully we will see each other again, but hopefully we will connect in some way again. Many thanks.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Thank you very much.